Greetings everyone, my name is Bife here. Our recent excursions into Warhammer have all been about 40k. I certainly plan on doing more of them too, given that you guys have responded really well to them, and I definitely still want to cover the Tyranids. But there are two other Warhammer properties in the form of Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I don't know much about the latter, but fantasy is something I've come to love over the past few years. As far as the setting is concerned, you're looking at something that's a little closer to the Renaissance as opposed to the typical Middle Ages. At least that's what it is for the most prominent human nation in the setting, the Empire of Mankind, Sigmar's empire. But their prominence in the setting is an oddity. They have what could be considered advanced technology by some and middling inventions by others. But they are also a nation steeped in religious zeal, and faith drives a lot of what happens in the nation. It is in certain ways a kind of paradox, a strange place unlike any other. Witch hunters have long stood alongside the mages of the colleges of magic and the alchemists that find prominence in the gunnery schools of Nuln. These witch hunters have long patrolled the realm of Sigmar, and their presence is often an uneasy but necessary one, especially considering that the Empire is haunted by vampires, the ruinous powers of chaos, or simply just heretics who refuse to profess their belief in the might of Sigmar Heldenhammer. But the witch hunters are also there to investigate any stranger rumors and happenings within the Empire. One such more common and unsettling rumor is that which can be found through the ravings of madmen, driven to insanity by the supposed sightings of ratmen in the sewers of the Empire's cities. It is these rumors that are typically laughed at and mocked openly. Scholars who write about them are discredited and lose their status and position. The leadership of the Empire's official status is that there is no such thing as a rat man, and that the menace of what would once have been known as the Skaven is not really a thing. The fact that the leadership of the Empire refuses to do anything about these recurring rumors is not a coincidence. It is in fact quite the opposite. Within the Empire and its many provinces, a conspiracy of silence has been enacted, and its aim is to discredit and cover up the existence of a menace of staggering proportions, a slumbering giant that sleeps beneath the waking world. Should it be roused to war against those that dwell above, the consequences will be nothing short of the utter destruction of all mankind. But this doom will not be delivered by a single death blow from some terrible magic sword deep into the heart of mankind's emperor. No, instead it will arise from those that dwell deep below. They look upon the rest of the world from the darkness of their own warrens with hungry, envious eyes, and they will tear us apart with 1,000 teeth and 1,000 claws. Meet the Skaven, the topic of today's video. And the reason why I had to introduce them through the lens of the Empire is that it's a bit odd to start any mention of Warhammer Fantasy's lore with a mention of the Skaven, because ultimately, the Skaven exist beneath everything else. The lands of the Empire, or Bretonnia, the Carax of the Dwarves, the great cities of Cathay, the terrible reaches of the Dark Elves' holdings over on the western side of the world, and even the Lizardmen of Lustria. All of them build their own civilizations toward the sky for the most part, with but one exception being the dwarves. And then there are others who exist alongside or beneath them, and those are the Skaven. It is no exaggeration to say that the Skaven are everywhere. And ultimately, whilst most people will gravitate towards the Empire, Chaos, or perhaps the Elves or Dwarves, it is the Skaven that one will find in every corner of the world, where there is at least a little bit of shadow for them to hide. By most reasonable estimates, excluding any gods that might take to the field or might give their local champions some great manifestation of their power, the Skaven are the most powerful faction in the entire setting, or at least they would be, if they could get things together for just a second or two and actually organize themselves. So today, we're going to talk about the Skaven in a much broader sense, and talk a little more about the horrors that lurk below the nations of Warhammer Fantasy. But that makes this video even more appropriate, because it is a sponsored video. It's sponsored by Fatshark and Daredrop, and it is a sponsored video featuring Vermintide 2. For those of you who aren't aware, this is a kind of horde survival game where you fight against the unending numbers of the Skaven in the name of the Empire of Man. You might have played a game like this before, but instead of a massive zombie horde, it's an unending wave of chittering rat men that you need to survive. They've just launched their new Versus mode, where you can face off against your friends as one of the heroes of the old world, or as one of the packed, sworn Skaven horde. Should you find yourself on the darker path and become a Skaven, you can choose to play as some of the iconic elites that you face in Vermintide, from the skulking gutter runner assassins to the crazed warp fire throwers. All the maps for the Versus mode have been altered to make them more streamlined for that experience, and they have more nooks and crannies that only Skaven players can access. It also has its own progression system of Versus ranks, which you can earn whilst also progressing your main characters in the game simultaneously. You also gain currency exclusive to Versus mode, which lets you buy new cosmetics, portraits, and more. Best of all, the game is going on a massive discount until November 26th. And I kid you not, this is possibly the biggest discount I've ever seen in my time on YouTube. It is a 95% discount. So if you want to get Vermintide 2 now, there is literally no better time. This is going to be better value than you find in almost any Steam sale. It's going to be better value than you find anywhere else at any point in time. The time to get it is now, so if you have even a passing interest and have maybe a few bucks to spare, yeah, jump in. Use my link down below and grab it for yourself, and thanks again to Fatshark and Daredrop for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the rats. To understand the Skaven, I think you need to understand that they are absolutely one of the most powerful forces in all of Warhammer Fantasy. Pound for pound, they can absolutely beat any other group within the setting based on the fact that there are just so damn many of them. If the Empire of Man, conservatively, numbers in the hundreds of thousands if not the millions, it's likely that the Skaven number in the billions if not tens of billions. Their entire existence is kept as a secret within the Empire as part of a great conspiracy of silence, because the belief is that open war, if it was ever declared on the Skaven, would bring the Empire to its knees. The Under-Empire might unite and rise to the surface everywhere within the Empire of Man, and if this ever did happen, the Empire would inevitably find itself overwhelmed, and doom would be brought to all of Sigmar's domain. This is something even more pressing when one remembers that there are forces they need to contend with already within their own borders, be they Beastmen or Greenskins, the forces of Chaos and Norsca that raid from the north, or maybe even just Dark Elf slavers that pass through their territories on the seas. The Empire has a lot of enemies that it needs to contend with, and a Skaven uprising from beneath would destabilize them in no short order. This belief isn't something founded simply on the idea the Skaven are that unnumbered horde either. There is precedent for such caution. Over 1,000 years ago, one of the Skaven's master assassins was able to kill Emperor Mandred. Emperor Mandred Skaven Slayer, for that matter, which was his title back in the day. And if it wasn't just down to individuals and their lives, even if they are powerful, the Skaven hordes have been actionably shown to be a mighty fighting force under the right circumstances. They've laid siege to greater empires found further afield in the world, such as the Empire of the Dwarves within the Dwarven Carracks in the mountains. The Dwarves, in fact, are now in ruin partially because of the Greenskins, but also partially because of the Skaven. Most terrible of all, though, is the evidence that can be found within the lands of Telia to the south of the Empire and Bretonnia. It is there that a great festering marshland lies, dividing it from its neighbour Estalia. And within that bog, something terrible festers. If one travels far enough, one might see a great ruined city with a magnificent spire reaching toward the heavens. Legends tell of the people of this city, who lived on the surface in harmony with the dwarves below. They aimed to build a great tower to honor their gods, but with every year its completion seemed to slip further from their grasp. One day, a stranger arrived promising to complete the tower in a single night, on the condition that they might add but a single adornment to its summit, a bell in worship of their own god. The people of the city had little to lose, and so they made the bargain with this hooded stranger, and to their astonishment, They awoke the next day and saw their marvelous tower completed. But as they stared on in awe and celebrated, the stranger who had made their bargain was nowhere to be seen. And then, the bell began to toll. It tolled 13 times, the sacred number of the Skaven. And doom fell swiftly upon the city. Warpstone rained from the sky. The farmlands on the periphery were sown with blight, and people started to go missing in droves. The men of the city had no other options, and in desperation petitioned the dwarves beneath them to give them shelter in the passages below the great human city, for the two were adjoined, and prosperity had flowed forth as a result. But the dwarves initially refused to open their doors. A second time they asked, and they heard only silence. Eventually, the tale goes that they broke down the doors into the dwarven city beneath, and as they peered into the darkness, they realized the terrible truth, as the darkness peered back at them with 10,000 gleaming red eyes. Now no man or dwarf inhabits that place. It is the home of a civilization of an entirely different kind now. That old name no longer matters, for after the doom that befell its people, it is now forever known as Skavenblight, the capital city of Skavenkind and the heart of the Under Empire. The existence of the great metropolis is proof enough that the power of the Skaven is real and quantifiable. It is reason enough for the Empire of Man to pause as they consider the Skaven threat. Should they wish to take the fight to the Ratmen below, all their great cities, from Nuln to Altdorf to Middenheim, might fall into ruin and become twisted carcasses of great civilizations, just like Skavenblight itself. But in truth, the Under Empire is more than a single bastion within a fetid swamp. The Skaven maintain a multitude of lairs and strongholds throughout the darker places of the world. In the north, one might find them in the horrifying mutant breeding grounds of Hellpit. In the south, one might find them in the deepest reaches of the conquered dwarven heartlands city, Carrick Eightpeaks. But in truth, their Under Empire is just that, a vast subterranean civilization built out of the caverns and stone of the world below. Whole generations of Skaven will live within the Under Empire, being born to live, fight, and die within the darkness. Their numbers are unfathomable, and their warrens will go deep enough to dig beneath the oceans of the world, connecting faraway continents beneath mountains and seas. But inevitably, as there are Skaven beneath the ground, all roads within the Under Empire lead to Skavenblight. All this might make the Skaven seem like an unstoppable force of numbers, whose united armies could drown the world in tooth, claw, and fur. But the reality is that without true leadership and a strong hand to direct them, the Skaven may never conquer the world, because first they must conquer their truest foe, each other. The Skaven, by their very nature, are cowardly, treacherous, and vicious. This distrust does not simply manifest between individuals who might kill each other over something as minor as a supposed slight, or even just more rations to eat, but it also extends to their leadership and their elites. The Skaven are organized into clans, who occupy specific territories within the world, and who are all trying to assure their dominance and survival. The most powerful of these clans will fight amongst themselves, from the lowest warrens all the way up to the most powerful governing force of their kind, the Council of 13, where the great lords of decay vie for dominance over all of Skavendom. The seats of this great council have shifted many times, as the Skaven are forever scheming to replace one another and surpass each other, but there is one seat that is never filled, and one that has never changed, the 13th, which is left symbolically empty, reserved for the Skaven's god, the Great Horned Rat. The only one whose authority over the world is absolute in the eyes of the Ratmen, and whose power can never be challenged by any amongst Skaven kind. Though the council is in a state of constant flux, there are some powerful great clans and organizations who are commonly represented on the Council of 13 and amongst the Lords of Decay. The warlocks of Clan Skryre are responsible for the technology of the Skaven, which harnesses the power of warpstone, a green, unstable substance craved by all Skaven kind. Their weapons of war include everything from rattling guns used to douse the enemy in a hail of warpstone gunfire, to warpfire throwers who descend upon their enemies with bouts of green flame. The Skaven's technology extends far beyond small arms though, as great warp lightning devices can be harnessed to fuel their own forms of siege artillery, such as the warp lightning cannons. The greatest inventors amongst all the Skaven are always pushing the boundaries of their twisted science, and have even been able to use warpstone's more unstable properties to create massive explosive devices capable of leveling entire cities. That's right, the Skaven have invented the equivalent in Warhammer of nuclear weapons. The only reason they haven't used them more often is that such warpstone technology is unstable by its very nature, and more devices are prematurely destroyed than actually set off. But warpstone is not only used for technological power, it is also used for its ability to mutate flesh for biological advantage. As the Skaven use its more unstable energies to mutate the creatures they find in the world, they will even go as far as mutating their own kind. Generally, to be one of the lowliest of the Skaven of the Under Empire is a terrible fate. You are likely to be doomed to a short life. But to be a lowly Skaven within the territories of Clan Moldar, the greatest of the mutators, is potentially a sentence worse than death. This great clan is known for providing the great beasts of war that fuel Skaven warlord conquests, and their master mutators commonly create the greatest abominations within their laboratories in Hellpit. A singular rat might be twisted into a wolf rat, made to charge with unnatural speed at the whims of their masters. They might be morphed into a monstrosity such as a rat ogre, with the strength to crumple men and dwarves alike beneath their rotting fists. Worst of all, many rats might be combined into something even more twisted and terrible. Whilst most of these terrible creatures simply die due to the wretched nature of their existence, those that survive are empowered with a terrible strength and purpose. These so-called Hellpit abominations tower over the forces of man and Skaven alike, and can even test the strength of giants and dragons. But outright brute strength is not the true way of the Skaven. For every strong Skaven black fur that might fall, there will inevitably be another 10 brown furs who flee in terror. If possible, the Skaven prefer to operate in secret and to strike from the shadows. Though many Skaven do this out of cowardice, there are some, such as the assassins of Clan Eshin, who have perfected this art form of killing. Having observed the practices of great warriors from far-off lands such as Cathay, Nippon, and Ind, these Skaven have become proficient in the art of brutal, sudden murder. Their silence and determination has earned them the respect of their peers and the fear of the leaders of many other great civilizations. It was the assassins of Clan Eshin who took the life of at least one emperor of Sigmar's realm over 1,000 years ago, and many a man has wandered too greedily into a place of shadow, only to never emerge thanks to a gutter runner's blades. They are perhaps the most dangerous of the great Skaven clans, if only because their contracts can cut through the agendas of any other leaders, be they Skaven or not. But of course, whilst even the highest clan warlord will be put to the torch for Skaven advantage, there are none amongst that cowardly race that would dare cross the great horned rat himself. The Skaven's god is worshipped universally amongst ratmen, but there are some sects amongst their people that worship in a more fanatical sense. There are those whose sickly devotion marks them as different and greater than any other. Enter the plague-stricken religious fanatics of Clan Pestilens, who serve their lord by spreading plagues and suffering to all of the rest of the mortal world. Their flesh is tainted, or perhaps blessed, with filth and decay, and their fanatic devotion to the great horned rat grants them speed and strength that one might not associate with their weakened, diseased stature. The Plague Monks of Clan Pestilens are both a menace on the battlefield and away from it, as their mere presence can taint the land beneath their feet, leading to a weakening of those on the sunlit lands above the Under-Empire. Strangely enough, though, these Skaven of Clan Pestilens and the Plague Monks represent only one religious group within the Skaven Horde, as the Order of Greyseers also exists. They are seen as a more traditionally connected and orthodox group of Skaven religion. They are also seen as more traditionally connected with the Great Horned Rat and its worship. On the Council of 13, it is always the head of the Order of Greyseers who is seated at the right hand of the Great Horned Rat's seat, and it is always the Order of the Greyseers that interpret the will of their god. Alliances between the Skaven clans are rare, but the threat they pose, even as a disunited horde, is never to be underestimated, for they are a tide of filth, capable of consuming the world should they be given the chance. It is not unheard of for the Skaven to broker alliances between themselves and the ruinous powers, if not for their material benefit, then for their own survival. With the terrible forces of the clans united, and with a powerful Chaos Lord, for example, to lead their forces, as might be the case in Vermintide 2, the Skaven might finally have the leadership required to bring their empire to bear. But even if defeated, the Skaven will never truly fail. Their numbers are unending, and so are their schemes. And every time they retreat into the dark of their warrens, licking their wounds from battles lost, they will begin to lay the foundations and schemes of their next attack. When facing a numberless horde such as this, that dwells within the deepest reaches of the earth, victory cannot be guaranteed, only survival. When declaring war upon the Skaven, one might as well declare war upon the shadows themselves. But that's all from me for today. Thanks again very much to Fatshark and Daredrop for sponsoring this video, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and let me know by hitting subscribe and the like button, and do particularly let me know because I'd love to make more videos about Warhammer generally, be it fantasy or not. The Skaven are a fantastic topic just to introduce all of fantasy to, but it certainly isn't the way that I would have started all of this. So if you guys do want a video on, say, the nature of Warhammer's world, the Empire of Mankind, Sigmar Heldenhammer, any of these things, let me know. It'll certainly be something I'll take a look into. Anyway, that's all from me for now. Know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.